All right, welcome to BSAD 111, Investing in Strengths, and this is week 2 or module 2. And this week we're going to really explore more deeply how to develop your own strengths and think about your individual strengths and how you can leverage those to be more successful. And speaking of success, I wanted to give you a few statements that we've gleaned from the research of Gallup on strengths in the workplace. So thinking about strengths in the context of working with other people in an organization. And so to fully understand how to apply your greatest talents and strengths in everyday life, it's figuring out how you can get into that strengths zone. And what we know is that folks that are experiencing and using their strengths at work are 6 times more likely to be engaged in their job. And that means emotional engagement, investment in the work that they do. So it obviously benefits the organization that they're working for, but it also benefits the individual because you go to work with a lot more passion and energy. Work goes faster, you get to do a lot of work, and you get a lot of satisfaction in the work that you do. Folks that are working out of their strengths, using their strengths daily, especially at work, report having an excellent quality of life, 3 times more likely to have an excellent quality of life. You look forward to going to work. You're much more likely to be telling your friends that you work for a great company. You're more accurate. Mentioned that before. Another thing that we know about those that are working out of their strengths are more positive. They have more positive than negative interactions with coworkers. This is really important too. If you've already had experiences of working with other people and having a job, you know that work is so much better when you have positive interactions with the people that you work with. If you connect with at least 1 or 2 people at work and enjoy being with them because they're positive and you're positive, work goes a lot faster and it's a lot more fulfilling. Again, we mentioned it before, but you work faster. Another thing that we know about people that are working out of their strengths is that they tend to have more positive, creative, and innovative moments. So you contribute more to the organization, and oftentimes you get noticed for that contribution. Another thing that often organizations really notice in their employees is whether or not they treat customers well. If you are great at working with customers, your interactions with customers are very positive and get to good solutions and resolutions, then you're going to get recognized by an organization. Again, overall, you achieve more daily when you're working out of your strengths. Okay, so everybody's had an opportunity to take StrengthsFinder. You've got that report. We encouraged you to get the Strengths Insight report, download it onto your computer. Please do that if you haven't done it already. You need to have it accessible because you'll be using this throughout the course, especially in your coaching session. So you've downloaded it. Here's the first 3 pages of my own Strengths Insight report. And so what we want to do and what we want to think about with the report, one of the assignments that you had was to go through that report and to highlight phrases that most resonated with you. And what we're looking for there is we're looking for you to be able to make this report your own, personalize it to you, and you can do that by going through and highlighting those phrases that are most accurate to who you are. Maybe they even describe situations in which you actually had those exact behaviors. Now, we also have to recognize that when you took StrengthsFinder, it only took 30 minutes on the internet, so there could be some of those statements that don't quite fit. And it's up to you to own as much of this report as you can. And so looking for examples of when it's happened in your past is another great way to think about the report as you read through that and embrace that information that you have about yourself. Again, it's your top 5. These aren't all the strengths that you possess. You have more than 5. But we chose to start with a report that gives you 5 because that can help you focus on some of those strengths and really learn about strengths-based development and how to create opportunities to utilize those strengths in a more focused manner. And if we gave you all of your strengths at once, it probably would just be overwhelming. So we'll start with 5. And when we think about our strengths, I think it's important. I'm going to revisit a slide that I shared with you in that first presentation because I wanted to go back and dive in a little bit deeper about how we experience these themes. And so the first one is, really, again, I guess overall, this is about understanding who we are. And here's some very specific ways to think about this. So for instance, they describe us. And what I've done is I've set 2 themes out there to kind of contrast how people experience this description piece. So when we think about a person that has high woo, this is this is a person that really enjoys, gets a lot of energy from opportunities to be with new people. So going to a party or going to an event where they don't know anybody is really pretty energizing to them. And so that describes a little bit about who they are as a person. They're going to look for those types of events and opportunities to participate in. A learner would have probably a very different way of describing themselves, and would probably lean more towards something about the energy that they get from understanding something in a way that they haven't ever understood it before. So really maximizing their learning and mastering some subject matter. Now, here's what's interesting is that these aren't two opposite themes. These are two themes that actually can go really well together. In fact, I've met a lot of people that have both woo and learner in their top 5. But this describes just one aspect of who they are. They influence our choices. So I put these two together because it does give a little bit of a contrast. Let's say these two folks are working in an organization and a project is offered up by a supervisor. And a maximizer is going to look more for opportunities to be involved with things where they can be involved with it over a longer period of time and have the ability to just continually improve whatever's going on within that project. So if it lasts a long time, that's okay with them. A restorative person is much more likely to select projects and make a choice on a project that they would participate on is if it was project-oriented, if it had a beginning and an end, and that person could see that termination point. Restorative folks like to look at things as problems to be solved. And so once the problem is solved, they're ready to move on to something else, whereas the maximizer can continue to find opportunities to do more and more. So for instance, a maximizer might make a great manager of people because people are constantly developing. They're never done. The problem is never over with. They continue to need development and opportunities to grow just a little bit more. They direct our actions. So let's say you're in an organization or you're in a student organization or a club, and there's a couple of people are engaged in an argument. These two themes, harmony and command, would react very differently to that scenario. And the harmony person would immediately want to take action around resolving that conflict. That's where their energy comes from, and they have this need to try to resolve the conflict. A command person, on the other hand, might want to enter into the argument. They might think that they have an opinion that they could lend that would help to resolve the issue. And so they might want to actually engage in the argument itself as opposed to resolving it. And so there again, our themes direct how we react to it. Not necessarily wrong or right. Sometimes it's important to go ahead and argue things out to finish them. And in other situations, it's more important to have that harmony perspective to say, hey, we're not getting anything done as long as we're arguing. So it depends on the situation. But those two themes can react very differently to the situation. And certainly the theme is directing the action. And lastly, they explain why we're better at some things than others. And I have these two themes, includer and individualization, up here because they would react very differently to say a scenario. Well, let's say, for instance, an includer. An includer is a person that's looking for opportunities and probably makes their best contribution when there's a group and there are folks that are feeling disenfranchised or they're feeling like they're not a part of the group. They haven't been included. Includers are great at creating opportunities to pull those people in so that they feel a part of the whole, whereas an individualization person is much more energized around opportunities to go deep with one person and to really figure out how that person ticks and how they can make a contribution to the large organization based on who they are as an individual, whereas an includer wants everybody involved. So those are two themes that are both needed within an organization and maybe specific situations. One theme is a little bit more, can be a little bit more of a contribution than another, but both are needed at different points in time. All right. You got your report, and now you have these words that describe you, and hopefully they describe you pretty accurately. But now we need to go further than that. We need more than just the opportunity to name the themes that we have, which hopefully that's what StrengthsFinder did for you. And now we need to go on to actually claiming those themes. And I think the best way to think about how you claim the information that you have is to think about examples that come to you as you're reading your report and you're thinking about the words in the definitions. Think about those times in your past where those situations might be illustrated by what you just read in the definition. So you're looking for opportunities in your past to be able to verify that this is a behavior that's pretty consistent with who you are. Once you've claimed it, then it's important to take that next step of aiming your strengths at something. And this is really about applying your strengths. So looking for opportunities immediately to apply that strength that you have a better understanding of, or maybe a first understanding of, that you've never even known that you possess that particular strength. Now it's time to figure out how to apply it in a way so that you can feel the success that you have with actually using that strength to accomplish something. And we're going to help you with that in those coaching sessions that are coming up. Your coach will sit down with you and help you think specifically about ways to apply your strengths in an academic setting, setting goals, managing your time, all kinds of different ways that you can use your strengths and begin to see how they impact and can provide you with opportunities to do better and better. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do, there's 34 themes, and so that gives us a lot of variety and a lot of different ways of describing people, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to work through all 34 in a short PowerPoint presentation. But I did want to give you some highlights of a few themes just to kind of get a sense of what it means to name it, claim it, and aim it at something. And so we're going to start with the theme competition. This one might be one that you actually possess. What we found is that in the statistics that we're gathering about students in the College of Business is that a lot of them have competition. It's actually the number one theme. And this is a theme where people get a lot of energy, where people that have this theme get a lot of energy from comparing themselves against other people. They don't compare themselves against themselves. That would be more like an achiever at the top of the list there. But instead, these folks like to compare themselves against other folks. And you might have experienced this if you have competition. You might experience this, when you played sports or were involved in debate or some other competitive opportunity during high school. So if that's the case, then claiming it as being able to maybe look at opportunities when we're just really serious about winning a board game with the family, for instance. Monopoly was just very important to you that you won. It wasn't just playing the game with friends or family. It was really about winning. So you claim it, and then next is how do you aim it? You obviously could continue to apply it within an athletic or sports setting, but it's more important to start to become more creative with how you apply that theme. And so let's think about competition in the sense of being more successful academically. And if you have competition, probably one of the things that motivates you is comparing your test scores to somebody else. So if you have a friend or somebody else in the class that you feel comfortable and they feel comfortable sharing scores with each other, that can be a huge motivator, whether you win or whether you lose. And losing sometimes is even a bigger motivator because you're not going to let it happen again. But that's the way you can aim that particular theme. Discipline is another theme that just to kind of show the range and depth of these themes is so very different from competition. But this theme is also a really, really helpful theme. And by the way, I didn't take time to describe the fact that the 34 themes are not random. We didn't just pull these out of the air and just define these as being behaviors consistent with humans. But instead, what we did was we observed these particular themes with people that use them in everyday work and everyday jobs. And so what you have when you look at a particular theme, any one of your 5 themes, they're all good themes, but whenever you look at one of your themes, know that that theme has been observed in helping somebody be excellent in a role in a number of different situations. And so all the themes are good themes, and all of them can contribute to us being successful. Discipline, specifically, are folks that really get a lot of energy from bringing order to things. And so they might have looked in their past, now that they have this positive word to describe themselves, they can probably look into their past and recognize the fact that they just felt better about their world when it was ordered. So they might quite possibly be the child that cleaned their room without being prompted by mom or dad. They really liked an ordered and neat room, and they have very organized and clean closets with a very specific organizational process behind how they store their clothes. So that's the claiming part. Aiming it, we love to have disciplined people be involved with creating order that the rest of folks within companies can experience. So anytime a disciplined person has the opportunity to create some structure that everybody can benefit from, they're going to get recognition for that. And so that's a great way to think about aiming that discipline theme. Positivity is another great one. Again, very different from discipline or competition, but nonetheless contributes a lot to people's success. And what we love about positivity people is that these are the folks that we would say look at the glass half full, and they always have a great way of shifting negative behavior into looking at it from a positive perspective. And what we know is that they increase productivity when we have somebody that has high positivity within a work group. The work group is much more likely to be productive simply because I think they have a better attitude, and that positivity person is rubbing off on the rest of the folks. The last one I wanted to mention was strategic. And strategic, again, is they get a tremendous amount of energy from being able to see different pathways to a destination. So if they've got a goal in front of them, they're going to be able to see several different ways to reach that goal. And based on things that happen in the process of trying to achieve that goal, things might change, and they'll be able to shift to another strategy because they've already thought of several different ways to get to the end goal. All right. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about how people perceive these themes, because it's quite possible that you have a particular strengths theme that has been looked at as a negative behavior by somebody that you know well. And probably the issue is that they don't understand that theme, they don't possess that theme themselves, and so it creates this whole dichotomy between balconies and basements. And so what we want to do is we want to shift our thinking from basements to balconies. And to do that, we need to think about these themes from that perspective. So I want to address a couple of things. I want to address the futuristic theme from that and help us gain a perspective on it and move it from that balcony to basement. So statements that we hear people saying about futuristic people that quite possibly don't possess that theme include they're crazy and kind of out there. Futuristic folks are ones that have a particular vision for the future. It seems very clear and distinct to them, and sometimes when they describe it to others, folks are like going, "Where are you coming from with that description?" They just have a hard time getting there because the futuristic person thinks so far out into the future. Sometimes they're described as being head in the clouds type people. And again, referencing that, being in a place where everybody else isn't. They're dreamers. Sometimes they're thought of as being not very realistic because folks can't catch up with the vision of the future that this person has, which might not seem possible based on what's going on in the current circumstances. Now, if we move that language up to the balcony, all of a sudden we see just the kind of contribution that a futuristic person can make. And that means that they are creative and they can see things that the rest of us can't. They stretch others. They help us move past the way we currently think about things to maybe a better way of thinking about things. Typically, they're also thought of as visionary. They can cast a vision for the way things ought to be and give us words and pictures to really help us, the rest of us, see it. And then in the process of that, they can inspire others. So that's helping us think about how do we help people understand what our themes contribute. And we need to sometimes be careful about just assuming that folks understand the theme that we have and understand our perspective. Sometimes we need to take a little bit more time to describe that. Another shift that I wanted us to make was to help us understand that all of us start with our strengths themes as being raw. We really don't have we don't experience our themes in a way that we're using them in a mature way, and so we describe that as a raw state. And all of us start that way and need to move towards using our strengths in a mature fashion. And so the consistency. Let me use the consistency theme as an example for that. Consistency is a theme that's all about fairness. They want everybody to get a fair shake. They don't want anybody to have an unfair advantage over others. And sometimes that can lead to them really interpreting things by the letter of the law. And there's very little, they appear very rigid and inflexible. And oftentimes that's a raw version of the consistency theme because, again, remember, consistency is thought of as a positive theme and a good theme, positive theme, because it contributes to us getting more work done. And oftentimes it helps us get work done together as a group. And so how do we shift from this rigid view, raw view of consistency to the spirit of the law? And so what that means is that folks understand that, yes, they're driven and energized by making sure that nobody gets an unfair advantage, but they also have a respect for people. And they think about how their decisions and how they interpret laws and how they affect people. And that's that mature state. That's moving to that place where they can say, okay, I understand the letter of the law, but I want to make sure that I interpret it in a way that it is fair for everyone, and that I'm not just having an overly rigid way of approaching this. And that's just that maturity, and always remembering that we're utilizing these themes to get work done. We're not using it to kind of grind things to a halt. And especially within the context of an organization, moving towards that mature state of consistency will be much more of a contribution to everybody's productivity. All right. I also wanted to just kind of do an introduction to these sets of statements, because I think they're helpful for us to examine our strengths and to start to develop ways that we can explain our strengths to others. And I'll give you an example of my own. I think this is also an assignment that you're going to have to reflect on Canvas. But I wanted to kind of give you an introduction to that. And the first one that I wanted to start with was this: you get the best of me win. So I'm going to use my theme of activator. Activators love to start things. They're not necessarily great at finishing them unless they have Achiever in their top 5 with that activator, and I don't. So I love to start stuff, and so you get the best of me when you give me opportunities to be on the front end of a project. So if somebody comes to me and says, we want to develop this new training program, or we want to create this new class or opportunity for students to participate in, I'm there, I'm with you. I want to participate in that because it's on the front end and it's starting something. And I get a lot of energy on that front end, probably the creativity piece. There's all kinds of different ways that I think it motivates me, but I love to be on the front end of starting something. Contrasting that with the same theme of activator, you get the worst of me when you're asking me to manage a process that doesn't require any creativity or any new thought. It just needs to be done accurately over and over and over and over again. Now, there are those roles within organizations, and probably all of us have a little bit of responsibility towards that. And I can do those things, but I don't get any energy from it. So as I move through my career, what I want to try to do is I want to shift myself more so to those opportunities where I do more things, where I start things versus managing a process over time. And part of that is just being able to describe it and explain it to others so that they know how to best leverage you within the organization. So those are a couple of things to be thinking about. The rest of the questions are really helpful as well. Not questions, but statements are helpful in helping you create ways to describe your strengths to others so that they can figure out the best way to utilize you and to also give you the best opportunity to use your strengths and be energized in what you do every day. I'll again end with the quote that I've shared with you before. You can't be anything you want to be, but you can be a whole lot more of who you already are. And I think we've just illustrated that again when exploring these strengths. So we've got 5 words. They describe us pretty well, hopefully. And now what we need to do is we need to figure out, again, how to find references and stories we can tell about how we've used our strengths in the past, and then figure out also ways to leverage those with new opportunities that come up to us in the future. I'll remind you again, we've got those discussion boards out there. I really take these seriously. Please make sure that you take time to reflect on the questions that you're asked or the assignment that you have in the discussion board, and then also take time to make some thoughtful responses to some of your classmates, at least 2 of your classmates, and look forward to being with you for Module 3.